why did I insert these sort of very personal narratives into what would be an academic thesis? You know, where does it play? So first of all, I also took in sort of ethnography. So this idea of being able to observe, and I practice autoethnography. And I looked at my life. I looked at that of my mother and my grandmother, and they made part of my key stake interviewees, because I think it's really important when we talk about education to be able to discuss these ideas of sort of introspection and reflection. And when we look at sort of our education system, and you talk about there being the failure of a formal mainstream education, I think, you know, I completely agree with you. What we have at the moment is a crisis. It's really a learning crisis. So tying this into the main sort of purpose and the aim of the thesis, it was to understand, what do we mean, or what is empowering pedagogy? So it really started from there. And one of those that led to sort of understanding what is empowering pedagogy is this sort of absence of having a introspective or reflective approach to learning. And so when I looked at my story, when I looked at that story of my mother and my grandmother, I wanted to understand how women within such difficult circumstances, women that grew up within sort of civil war of Colombia, and then my mother grew up within the violence, that sort of urban violence, the cartels, poverty, growing up with an oppressive and abusive father. How were these women able to then become empowered? How were they then able to move continents and make a new life for themselves and identity? Because what we do is we largely look at sort of this social group, and we call them vulnerable. And especially if they don't come from a formal education background, like my grandmother, we would then say that, you know, that she's uneducated and she's vulnerable. And we present sort of a whole list of services and prerequisites. And I think what happens in sort of those situations is we miss the opportunity to learn from these women. And that's where this idea of sort of informal education, ancient wisdom, really sort of came out of the thesis.